Hello. So today's video, we are going to cover medical tourism, specifically talking about preparing to travel. And today I'm going to cover specifically some healthy habits, some health tips, and some things that are important to take into consideration prior to embarking on a journey of travel, whether it be for medical tourism or for something such as a sabbatical or even long term travel just for fun. In particular, if you are desiring to have the option of kind of just bopping around and going to wherever it is that you desire to go, it's important to take some things into consideration as it relates to your health prior to embarking upon your journey. So now that you have your passport, let's talk about some health tips. But before we get into that, let me introduce myself. My name is Nicole, and I am a nurse practitioner with a background in family medicine. On this channel, I talk about health and wellness for Black women over the age of 40. And in particular, on this series, we're talking about patients with passports and just considering ourselves as global citizens, exploring what our options are in healthcare, and also creating the life that we desire to live rather than settling for the one that has been assigned to us. So if that is something that you are interested in, please go ahead and subscribe to this channel so I can provide you with more interesting content along those lines. So let's get into today's video. So as I am thinking about travel because I'm preparing for a longer term trip, I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about some of the things that I like to take into consideration before traveling, just because health and wellness is my passion. So I'm always thinking about my health and thinking about maintaining my health. And I know that for me, one of the worst things that can ever happen to me is being on vacation and being sick and miserable. It takes just just a split second from a wonderful trip to go from your dream trip to your worst nightmare. If you start to have a health condition or something that you are in a position that you're not really prepared to take care of. So in this video, I'm going to cover a few things that I like to take into consideration prior to travel and some things that I like to do to ensure that to the best of my ability that I'm able to maintain and preserve my health while I'm away, protect it so that I can really just enjoy my time of traveling. So the first thing that is important and I like to do is check, first of all, just the CDC's website for travel. They have a website for travelers, and this I find in particular helpful, like if I am not really settled on a destination and perhaps I have a couple of destinations in mind that I am considering. Sometimes I'll go to just the CDC travelers website and take a look to determine if there are any outbreaks or health conditions that are going on in the particular areas that I am considering, because that could certainly be a deterrent. So if is a measles outbreak in a particular country that seems to be spreading, then maybe that's not the time for me to consider that on my list of destinations. So just something that I like to do when it's an option, when we have time, when it's an option, just taking that into consideration. Secondly, I always make sure that I am up to date on all of my routine standard vaccines. So that's like your tetanus vaccine, your flu shot, your measles, polio, some vaccines that maybe you haven't thought about in a while. And that's because here in the United States, we tend to stay up to date on our vaccines, but also a lot of the vaccine preventable illnesses are not really having outbreaks here in the United States, but that's not true across the globe and in other countries. So it's not uncommon in other countries in particular where something that maybe you haven't heard of as an outbreak for your entire lifetime, there could be an outbreak in a country that you might be thinking about going to. So it's really important just to ensure that your vaccines are up to date so that you are not at risk for developing those particular conditions. The other thing that I like to do when I am considering travel, and in particular long-term travel, is making an appointment with my travel health consultant. I find that extremely important because the travel health consultant is going to provide, I think, some valuable information, tips on the particular countries that you might have in mind where you are planning to visit, and health information as it relates to things that you can do to prevent illness and also take care of the illness if you were to be exposed. The other thing that I like about visiting my travel health consultant is being able to get information specific to the countries that I intend to visit if I do have an itinerary and know where I'm going to be or how long I'm going to be there. Although travel health consultations are frequently not covered by insurance, commercial insurance here in the United States, sometimes the vaccines that are recommended by your travel health consultant are covered. So there is some benefit in considering a travel health consultation while you still have insurance, even if they don't cover it, because at least that way, perhaps some of the vaccines that you may need may be covered. In addition to that, typically your travel health consultant is going to prescribe some anti-diarrhea medications for like traveler's diarrhea. Typically, they'll prescribe some antibiotics, which are extremely helpful if you unfortunately get exposed to some gastrointestinal illness and start having symptoms of traveler's diarrhea, which can really make traveling go south if you don't have the necessary tools and resources to address it. So having that medication on hand can be extremely beneficial, and those medications are typically covered by your insurance. In addition to that, typically they are going to prescribe anti-malaria medications if you are going to be in areas where malaria is prevalent. Also, the travel health consultant will be able to let you know which medications, even for malaria, may be beneficial and which may not, because in certain regions, sometimes there is resistance to certain medications for malaria. So just because a certain malaria medication that you used in the past was good in one region may not necessarily be applicable to a different region. So I love, prior to travel, I love making sure that I'm up to date on those types of things to preserve my health while I'm traveling. Another thing that I find really, really important is making sure that I get traveler's health insurance. So this is not just like lost baggage insurance or whatever the airline would cover, but this is insurance specifically as it relates to medical expenses. Although many of us, of course, we don't want to think about the idea of potentially getting sick or having to seek medical services while we're living our best life overseas. But the truth of the matter is life happens, and it's best for us to be prepared. So shopping around for a good traveler's insurance is good, that has good coverage. And that way, if you are in another country somewhere and something happens, whether you get sick, have an illness, an injury, and you need to seek medical care, at least you can do so with confidence, knowing that it's going to be covered by your insurance, or at least a portion of it is going to be covered by your insurance. In addition to that, typically travelers' health insurance is going to have evacuation insurance. So if you were to get in a situation, unforeseen, of course, where you need to be flown out of that country for whatever reason, then the evacuation insurance will cover that. And I feel that that's of extreme importance. I know recently when I was in Mexico in July and the Caribbean waters, there were some hurricanes that were starting to come and the storms in the sea. And I hadn't thought about my evacuation insurance until that point, because I was, at that point, I was thinking, if I have to get up out of here for my safety, I definitely want the option to be able to leave for whatever reason. But in addition to that, I think it's just really important to have that option, and also review your policy. Make sure that you're aware of what things are covered by your traveler's insurance, what activities will not be covered. A lot of traveler's insurance will not cover high risk types of activities like bungee jumping and different activities that are going to certainly be a very high risk for injury. So if you do intend to participate in some of those things, you'll want to maybe make sure that you purchase extra coverage on your insurance that will qualify in the case you're injured with those particular circumstances. The other thing that I like to do when I'm traveling is carry a health and safety kit. And that for me would involve a few things. One would be water purifying tablets. And water purifying tablets, they're available on Amazon. But in the case you were in a situation where you didn't have access to clean water, bottled water, it's not likely, right? And for most of us, unless we're hikers. But if you're in a situation and you have to drink tap water, the purifying tablets would purify the water so that hopefully you wouldn't get sick as a result of it. Secondly, what I like to carry in my pack is a rehydration packet. So something like Pedialyte, along those lines. So basically, one of the number one things that tends to happen when you're traveling is getting a gastrointestinal illness from eating or drinking some contaminated food. And so, the nausea, the vomiting, the diarrhea. One of the best gifts that you can give yourself is number one, having access to clean water, but also number two, rehydration. Water can definitely help to benefit you, but one of the things when you're really ill is that you're going to lose electrolytes. And so in order for you to get better, it is extremely essential for you to be able to rehydrate with some electrolyte salts. And so those are something that I like to keep on hand. In addition, of course, I love to keep on hand some Pepto-Bismol, some Imodium, some Tylenol, a first aid kit, all of those things. In the case that I were to have a minor illness or injury, that I could just give myself or whoever I'm with some first aid. Of course, under normal circumstances, when we are at home, we can easily go get those items from a local store. But when you're traveling abroad, and in particular in areas where there may be a language barrier, you'd be surprised how challenging it may be to find basic first aid type materials if you have a language barrier, or maybe you don't know geographically where the pharmacy is, or don't know how to ask for it. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. The other thing that I like to do, especially with long-term travel, if I'm going to be staying somewhere, is I like to research in advance where the healthcare facilities are and pharmacies are that are nearest to where my accommodation is going to be. And that way, if I were to have some kind of health or medical issue that I needed to seek care for, then I know specifically I have something in mind where I can tell an Uber driver or tell a hotel receptionist or tell a neighbor to take me to XYZ place if I need that type of intervention. And I believe that is in particularly extremely beneficial if you are kind of a high risk person. So if you are elderly, or if you have underlying chronic health conditions that can potentially become exacerbated while you're traveling, it's definitely important to keep in mind where you can find and seek out medical care while you're away. You don't want to be trying to figure that out while you're sick or in the middle of an emergency. You don't want to be trying to figure out which hospital is the one that you would feel safest at. It's better to plan ahead so that you're not trying to figure that out or relying on other people to make that decision for you while you're sick. So of course, basic things like having hand sanitizer is in my safety kit that I love to travel with. And the other thing I guess I would end here is to say that when traveling, especially longer term travel, say for example, for like a month or more, it's also important to take into consideration the medications that you will need while you're away, and start planning in advance how you're going to get them or access them or have them available for while you're away. It's also good to check the embassy of where you're traveling to make sure you know the quantities that are allowed that you're able to have. You don't want to break any laws by entering into anybody's country with anything that you're not supposed to have, especially as it relates to something like controlled substances or those types of things. But generally speaking, between a 30 to 90-day supply is something that may be okay to have in most other countries, but you'll want to just make sure, especially with regard to certain specific medications, make sure that it's safe for you to bring them. Because if your medications do get taken while you're at the airport, now you're going to have to figure out what you're going to do. So, so those are just a few tips that I like to keep in mind as it relates to my health in order to stay healthy while I travel. And also, I like to think about the types of activities that I'm going to participate in, the foods and the drinks, and the different things that I can do to ensure that I'm hopefully going to reduce the likelihood that I'm going to become severely ill while I'm traveling. I'm very, very cautious. I'm a cautious traveler. A lot of y'all are probably a lot more adventurous than I am, but that's probably the result of my many years of being a nurse. I don't need any more adventure when it comes to my health. I've adventured enough. So that's all that I have for you today. Let me know if there's anything that I missed as it relates to preparing for a healthy long-term trip. If anything that you'd like to include, please leave that in the comments below. And thank you so much for watching. Bye.